certainly with the debacle of the last Commissioner's Court, with the farce of this RV, there's half the county out there that wasn't represented. So these people are going to eventually come to the gates with the pitchforks and the torches if we don't start listening to them.
I understand it isn't a debate, and it isn't for the commissioners to discuss it all that day necessarily.
The only thing, I just don't really see any downside to it.
Welcome back once again to another Shark Show. Glad you guys are watching. We have a special guest, Melanie Graff. You're filling in for Courtney Gore, and we appreciate you coming back for your second show.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to discuss Commissioner Court on January 26, 2021, miscellaneous items on the agenda, and it'll be under C, 5, and 6. And this is going to pertain to the rules of procedure, conduct, and decorum at meetings at the Commissioner Court. And this was placed on the agenda by Commissioner Dave Eagle because the old rules of procedure are about 8 years old.
Yeah.
And we'll listen to the judge here introduce this agenda item.
This brings us to item number 5, discuss and take appropriate action regarding rules of procedure, conduct, and decorum at meetings of the County Commissioners Court, dated February the 26th, 2013. Commissioner Eagle.
Yes, sir.
So the judge introduces it, and I know we've been on the judge a little bit about, how, he kind of takes over the meeting and everybody else's agenda. So, right off the bat, good job, Judge, handing it straight, to Dave Eagle, Commissioner Eagle. That's a plus. We appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the right thing to do. If a commissioner puts something on the agenda, let them be the one to open it up.
Exactly. So let's listen to Commissioner Eagle explain the agenda item.
Code 81, that entire statute discusses what the commissioner's powers and duties are. So since they're 8 years old, I just thought it would be a good idea, and I think there have been some questions about some of the items that are in the rules of decorum. And so I thought, well, I would put it on the agenda for us to talk about and let the public know that we do have these available online, and it might be a good idea for us to think about readopting them.
Okay, so Commissioner Eagle brings up the rules of decorum and the procedures and what the Commissioner Court is supposed to follow. And Nate, you've run into that, and a lot of citizens have run into that about on how much time people are speaking when they come up and approach their elected officials on an agenda item.
What we've encountered before was they weren't following the rules, and now they've kind of honed back in and started going by the book a little more, which is a good thing. That's what we want, And I'm glad that Commissioner Eagle put this on the agenda also because it gives Kevin Andrews, Precinct 1 Commissioner, and Jack Wilson over in 3 that just took their spots behind the dais, gives them an opportunity to really understand how things are supposed to be run.
And we're looking at agenda item number 5 about the decorum and the rules, procedures, but they kind of mix it with 5 and 6. And number 6 is actually separate. But what Commissioner Eagle did is he placed on the agenda to discuss, take appropriate action regarding adding a standing agenda item in its citizens' comments. And, I think Granbury has this.
Yeah.
Stevens County, I think, has this. And it's just, I believe it's once a month, and it's for the citizens to come up. They allot a half hour to do this, and they can talk about anything that's not on the agenda. And, they go up, speak their mind. They have their 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever they decide. And, the court just sits back and listens, and hopefully it'll spur more, citizen comments, more activity, more things that the Commissioner's Court can look at.
I've spoken in court, and it's important for our voices to be heard, and especially, I think, with what happened with our presidential election, people are frustrated, and they need a place to go and have their voices heard and to be able to vent, and what better place than in our own backyard.
Right, with your own elected officials
right.
that you live with, and, you go back and forth, you see them at church and grocery store and things like that. Let's listen to the judge because a lot of things have come up, the citizen comments, placing things on the agenda, and that's what these rules and procedures and decorum are all about. So I think after 8 years, we need to kind of, make these a little bit more citizen-friendly, and where citizens actually have a voice in public, not just knocking on somebody's door, seeing them at the grocery store, but in public to address their needs and concerns. Let's listen to the judge.
As soon as you put this on the agenda, and I like the fact that the rules of procedure state that any request to be put on the agenda has got to come by through one of the commissioners or the county judge. That's how it's put on the agenda. And no commissioner and no county judge can prevent any item from being put on the agenda once it's sponsored by a commissioner or a county judge. So if any citizen wants to put something on the agenda, you just have to contact one of the commissioners. You usually go to one of the commissioners that are in your precinct, but it's not necessary. Or you can come to the county judge, talk to them. It'll be put on the agenda. I've never known of anybody to refuse to put anything on the agenda. I know I'd never refused to put anything on the agenda, and I've never heard of any citizen saying, I went to a commissioner, try to get something on the agenda, and they wouldn't put it on the agenda. But it needs to be put on by 12 noon on the Wednesday immediately preceding the next regular meeting. The reason for this, it gives everybody the opportunity to do the necessary research to find out whether you approve that item or you disapprove that item.
So the judge is actually moving in a different direction. He's talking about agenda items, which is great. That's all part of this, and I think they, maybe have a workshop or something coming up. But he states that he hasn't heard or doesn't know of any agenda item that a citizen has been refused, because we have several instances where this is truly the fact, where things have not been placed on the agenda. I could probably see some circumstances where maybe they wouldn't want to put something on there, but that will give somebody, if they open this up for non-agenda items, to at least talk about and express, citizen concerns. And the judge kind of hammered it a little bit on, oh, we've never done that. I haven't heard of the commissioners. Well, Nate, don't you have a instant?
Mike, it's interesting that the judge would say that when it wasn't but a few months ago I went to him and I wanted to use the second story courtroom there in the courthouse, downtown historic courthouse. I wanted to use that to produce a couple videos similar to like what we're doing here. And when I went in there, he said, nope, I'm not going to support it. No way. Basically get out of my office. And
well, this is before Blue Shark, right?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
This is before
Right.
then, yeah.
Right.
And, just to hear him say that, I mean, and I guess I'm not surprised to hear him say it, but it is still kind of sad to know that a judge especially can get up there and just slide through his teeth.
And that might have been something you'd be able to bring to court during that citizen, once a month, during that citizen time where you can speak for 3 minutes or 5 and say it.
And not just that, but anything. This citizen comment section is kind of like a fail-safe. Like, let's say worst case scenario, all of our commissioners and our judge were entirely compromised, but knowing that these videos are streamed onto the internet and then cataloged, if a citizen had some serious concern of corruption, felt like they had nowhere else to go, or maybe they're being mistreated by their own commissioner or whatever, like this gives them an outlet.
Right. And speaking of that, we have an email, and when people were in court and speaking on this item, of course, people are coming to Blue Shark. They know what we're about, truth and transparency, and they're just kind of shaking their heads, going, "Wait, time out, Judge. That's not what's going on at all." We have this email from Christine Leftwich, and she sent it on Wednesday, January 20th, to Commissioner Ron Cotton, and CC'd the other commissioners, but not the judge.
Yeah.
So he didn't get this email. And it says, "Greetings, Mr. Cotton. I'm a resident of Precinct 2, and though we have not met formally introduced, I was present at the January 12th, 2021 meeting. I'm requesting agenda item C1 for the meeting to be placed on the agenda for reconsideration, because half the county, the two commissioners that represent half the county, they weren't there. So there's instances of the commissioners actually not doing what the judge thinks they are doing. So this would be a remedy for that also.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like the judge, he wants there to be a gatekeeper between the citizens and speaking in public at these deals. And I get that, like, during a meeting you want to have people speak to certain agenda items, but why not have that open one? I think somebody brought up, what is he scared that people are going to get up there and say? There's already rules in place to make sure that no one's like straight up slandering him or cursing or, you know, crazy stuff like that. So what's he worried about?
Yeah, I think, you know, no matter what your position is, for, against, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Your voice still needs to be heard.
Yeah.
And maybe he's concerned about a time limit factor, but if I heard correctly, I think it could only be an additional 30 minutes.
That was what was being proposed.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it shouldn't make the meeting too much longer.
And you know, here's how I feel about that. Yes, these meetings, they can go 2, 3, 4 hours plus, and then run into executive session, even go longer. But you know what? They're paid $75,000 plus. The judge is paid $135,000, and they have 2 meetings a month, and maybe some, you know, emergency meetings in between or workshops. But this is their job. This is their number one priority, to be public servants. Mm-hmm. And so this, you know, I know they say their door is always open, but there's a difference between talking to an elected official inside closed doors and then bringing it out in the light of public. Let's listen as the judge continues to speak.
I'm all in favor of adopting new rules based upon what the government has put out for Commissioners Court and what the courts have adopted around us.
So the judge kind of, and we're jumping back and forth between item 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And he's okay with putting out, you know, the procedures through the government, what the government wants, what the counties around us have adopted, the other governments. Well, we didn't elect the Johnson County judge.
Nope.
We didn't elect anybody around here. We elected these people, the judge and commissioners, and our community to decide. And not once does the county judge say, and what the citizens would like. That should be his number one, not what's government, not what other communities do. It's what the Hood County residents want. And that's missing from, well, at least 2 of the, you know, the judge and Ron Cotton up here. And that needs to be, you know, the citizens need to say, look, you need to worry about Hood County first. And Dave Eagle brings that up, Commissioner Eagle brings that up, and talks about the different areas that have it. And let's listen to Commissioner Eagle.
The parameters are that if it's not on the agenda, and they bring a topic up that's not on the agenda, we can't talk back to them. All we can do is sit here and listen and thank them for their time, and maybe there's something that we can put in a note that maybe it's something we can do later. I don't know.
And Commissioner Eagle goes on and you know, talks about City of Granbury and Stevens County, and basically what it is, you go up there, you speak your mind as a citizen to the Commissioner's Court, and they just kind of sit back, take it in, they could take notes, but it's not on the agenda, so they can't make any type of decisions based upon this, you know, once a month community citizen open forum type talk.
And they can't even make remarks, right, because of the Open Meetings Act.
Correct. They're not supposed to make any marks, which, you know, in the case of the judge that loves to interject into everything,
Yeah.
that's going to be hard for him to do.
And that could be why he was fighting it so hard, you know, and we'll get into that here in a minute, but he was talking about, oh, well, you know, we won't have time to prepare a defense. It's like, dude, you're not an attorney anymore. You're the Hood County judge. You're a public servant.
Right. Melanie, you were in that court that day, and you brought this up to us earlier, and, you know, you were talking about social media. You want to explain kind of what it was?
Yeah, social media is censoring all the way across the board. I think, too, that a lot of us feel, even with the presidential election, that our voices weren't heard as far as with the election fraud. And and how it wasn't looked into, and we're frustrated and we don't have a place to go. We can't voice our opinions on social media because we've been censored. Of course, we can't voice our opinions to the federal government, and all we have left is our local government. So it's very much needed, and I don't think we need a response from Commissioners Court. People just need to get out there and vent, and just let them know what issues they're dealing with. They need to have a place to go.
Right. And, that could be positive, negative, neutral. It can be, run the whole gambit of, hey, great job on this Christmas deal, or you're doing really good with COVID, or, you need to do this or that. And it could be something that they can take and go, hey, we can improve on this. We know we're doing good on this. And it could be a positive experience on kind of how they're doing.
I mean, they are working for the people, so how could you do that? I think you do that best by listening to the people. And if you don't give them an opportunity to speak, you never really know what the people are thinking. So that you can't best serve them without listening to them.
And that's the perfect example. And we had the judge in the Shark Tank in one of our videos, and it's because he was getting on the citizens and interrupting the citizens and not letting him talk. And then we ran into the "your time is up" type deal. Well, they talk 90% of the time, and so I think this would be another avenue where citizens can just go up and explain their position.
Sometimes the citizens speak and then they get interrupted, and they're still running their time down, even though they're not speaking. So they don't always get their full allotted time either.
Right. And, it can't be on an agenda item that's there, because they can sign up and speak to that.
Yeah.
But, if they were at court, and we have a lot of people showing up now, to a lot of these courts, commissioner courts, and if they were there the previous week and wanted to finish up with something that they weren't able to say, or they got cut off or whatever, they can go back up there and just talk.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they want to get up there and talk about stuff like a regional water plant, what are we going to do with these emergency services district? Do we need to fund the fire department more? Like, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on in the county that's not on the agenda, and what Dave's trying to do is give people a way to go up there and talk about it.
Right. And on this, we're kind of going chronological with time on the commissioner court, because that's kind of the easiest to do a summary of how the commissioner court went. Now let's listen to the judge come back to the agenda item. He's kind of stuck on the agenda item and not the actual speaking of the citizens. Let's listen to what he has to say.
No, I have no example of anybody ever saying, hey, I brought an item up to a commissioner to be put on the agenda, and the commissioner refused to do it. Will you go ahead and sponsor it yourself? That's never happened to me.
He goes back to the agenda item, disregarding everything that everybody's talking about, and he may feel that this is important to him, but we just showed a couple of examples that wasn't true, and hopefully through this show, the judge will see when he watches that it is going on with the agenda items, and it's something that needs to be fixed. Now, can the judge fix it himself? No. He's his own elected official. He can actually, if you get refused, maybe Ms. Leftwich can go to the judge, since Ron Cotton refused and didn't send an email back. Maybe that's the best way for Ms. Leftwich to handle it. But he said he would not refuse it. And everybody kind of knows that when you get in politics, if you don't want to answer a question, you start redirecting.
Oh, yeah.
Redirecting to everything else. So you'll find a lot of times in the commissioner court, it looks like we're doubling up as we go through the timeline. But what's happening is things start to get redirected.
Yeah, the old Kansas City shuffle.
That's right. And let's talk about something and get everybody interested on what's going on over here, and let's not answer the question. Okay, now, as we listen to the judge is stuck on the agenda items and the pros and cons and lining things up as we talk to the agenda. He's moving away from item 6, which Commissioner Eagle brought up, of citizens expressing their point of view without any interruption from the bench for any commissioner or judge. So let's listen as things continue to move a different direction.
But the big thing is, rather than coming down here and just give me what you want to say about this, every one of the rules that have it says that you should put the request must be filed by and approved by at least one member of the Commissioners Court and or the county judge by 12 noon on the Wednesday immediately preceding the next regular meeting. All this does is give you an opportunity for both the fors and against to have a fair start on the research.
So the judge is talking about an agenda item, not the actual, citizen comment where he doesn't say anything. And he says what the big thing is, a resident coming up here and just giving us what you want to say, that's not how it's done. And that's exactly how this once a month agenda item that Commissioner Eagle put on there. It's coming up there and telling us what you say. But see, he doesn't want that. He wants the old agenda way, and he doesn't want this part of the citizen comment.
Yeah, that's, you can tell he doesn't want to be able to not respond to whatever's being brought up by a citizen, no matter what their concern is.
Just want to bring up something right here in the court when nobody has a chance to investigate or to do their own independent research. That's the whole basis for this rule here. Now, you're still never going to be deprived of what you want to say. If you want to say something, you are going to be allowed to say it.
About the having time to do research, and then he also talks about the people for or against. But the whole point of the citizens being able to speak is that they're just supposed to listen. So none of that is needed. None of the above are needed.
Right. They're not actually acting on or deciding to vote on an item that's on the agenda. It's specifically not on the agenda, so they can't vote on it.
And it could be that they don't know what the people are going to talk about, so maybe it makes them a little nervous because they have no idea what so-and-so is going to bring up in that part.
And it's funny, these things happen at the city of Granbury's city council meetings, and the people will get up there and they'll talk about whatever their concern is, and at the end, the mayor, whoever's presiding, says, "Thank you for your input, next speaker." That's all we're asking for.
That's right. And, it shouldn't even be an ask, right? It should be a done deal, and it should be part of the procedures that they put in.
Yeah. Which, hopefully this passes at the next court and, we can move on.
And I think a lot of it might be trying to educate Ron, because the notice, and please go back and watch these videos from the Commissioner Court so you can actually see the interchange between Ron and them trying to explain to each other what they think this is and what it isn't. You can learn a lot by what goes on kind of behind the microphone if you watch expressions and things like that.
Yeah.
And let's listen to what the judge's personal preference is, where he's leaning on this agenda item.
It's on the bulletin board, it's on our website, and everybody gets an opportunity to find out what's everybody's putting on the agenda. That happens to be my personal preference.
So the judge's personal preference is come to court when there's an agenda item on the agenda and sign up to speak. You'll know a few days ahead of time, but don't dare come here and speak on something that we may not know about because we're kind of afraid of what you might say.
That's basically what he was saying. I mean, he took a position against allowing citizens to come up and speak. I mean, it's not in keeping with ideas like the word they threw around all that day, transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at this next, video clip, and he talks about the fairness doctrine, and the fairness doctrine has to do with the FCC. It has nothing to do with Commissioner's Court. Let's listen.
If it's an immediacy problem, we have the emergency meeting. We can do it in an hour on the deal. But it's better to have both sides prepared. That's why in a trial in law or anything, you have notice requirements where both sides are given the same opportunity to present their side of the story. That's the fairness doctrine.
And so as you watch the video, he talks about the fairness doctrine, which does not cover what he's doing here with the Commissioner Court.
Yeah.
And he goes back to, trial law days where the defense and the prosecution are all set up and, it's a battle. Well, this has nothing to do with that. He's not an attorney right now. He's a public servant. I wish he'd be a county judge public servant and forget that he ever was an attorney, because the attorney takes over and it should be the public servant.
Yeah, and he talks about the fairness doctrine and everybody having access to the information and blah blah blah, and he's stuck in that mindset. Like, he still thinks that he's an attorney, and it's like, yes, he still is legally an attorney, but when you're acting as the county judge in this instance in Commissioner's Court, you're a public servant.
And
Right.
I would go back to just the free will of the people to be able to speak and to be heard.
And you think you would err, and I that's a wrong word, but you would err on the side of the citizens. And as an attorney, he errs on the side of the legality process that has nothing to do with being a servant. Okay, now Ron, the other Ron, Commissioner Ron Cotton, gets involved. And let's listen to another ghost transparency siding of the word that actually doesn't mean transparency. Let's listen.
Until the next week, then we could put it on the agenda. It's not an emergency. You can't make 12 noon on the Wednesday before court on Tuesday. The reason I'm for that is I think for transparency, I want the people to know what we're going to talk about. That's why we put the agenda out.
Okay, transparency. That's why we put the agenda out. Let's, the judge hasn't gotten quite over here about saying, we're talking about Dave's item here about the citizen speaking. They want to go back to the agenda and switch the conversation to, oh, no, transparency. Let's put out everything on the agenda and the people can talk all they want. Well, they keep brushing aside. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about Dave's deal. Let's make it about the agenda and when they talk pros and cons.
It's really frustrating when you're sitting there in Commissioner's Court because, first of all, we've got this word of the day, transparency, and then you're just wanting them to get to the point, but they're doing everything they can but to get to the point. So as a citizen sitting there, it's just, it's frustrating because it's a waste of time and beating around the bush, and they just spend more time trying to avoid the issue.
And it's funny, you say they're spending a lot of time beating around the issue and smoke and mirrors and stuff. This is all typical politician stuff. And the issue gets brought up, they find a way to weasel out of it, direct the conversation over here, and then, the people end up not getting what they deserve in this instance. And, it's sad to see these two engage in this type of behavior. But I personally, Mike, I'm sure you can too, Melanie, same as you, can probably spot this stuff a mile away.
And you know what? I give Ron and Ron credit that they're at least taking Democrat principles and targeting things like that from the Democrats, but they're using them against Republicans and the citizens, and they seem to be doing a good job. I mean, you got to give them credit for trying, but what we see here is we point out the real truth and shine the light on what they're doing. And they're trying to make it the Ron and Ron show again by moving over to a different thing that's not even on the agenda. And, like I've said before, two Rons don't make a right.
Yeah. And watching these two these last several months, they've really become their own caucus. Maybe we can start calling them the Ron Caucus.
The Ron and Ron Caucus. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. And, we joke about this because it's really not a joking matter because it's the citizens coming up here. But once again, you just have to look at it for what it is. I mean, trying to game the system. You think you get these people elected and they're there to do the right things, and people just don't watch. And had it not been for people coming up to speak and talk, you really see where your elected officials stand. And if they're not standing the way you want, then it's time to primary them.
And I would say just to the people that watch this YouTube or Facebook, if they haven't come to Commissioner's Court, to encourage them to come and to speak and have their voice heard and get more involved.
100%. Yeah, that's kind of what we're all about here, guys. We're taking local politics, these long, drawn-out Commissioners Court meetings, trying to get them condensed down for you to where you can still go through your day-to-day of picking up the kids or dropping them off or running around soccer practice and, tune in, get at least a perspective that you're not getting any other perspective right now.
That's right. And we, another plug, we do have a podcast you can listen to, so you don't have to just watch it, but please go to court, listen to this, listen to the county YouTube. It's all right here for everybody to hear. Now let's listen to the judge speak on what really comes out and what he's doing in his thinking process.
But what if somebody on the other side wanted to just bring up something that was contrary to your position and didn't have it on the agenda, so you wouldn't have an opportunity to be here to put forth your argument? Do you see how unfair that could be to you? That if somebody that had a diametrically opposed position to...
There you go, Nate. What do you think?
I mean, to me, he just really showed what his big concern is right there. He, is worried about somebody coming in and maybe he sees it as blindsiding him, but really it's just citizens bringing stuff to their attention.
And what's wrong with somebody coming in from the other side and having an opposing viewpoint? I mean, is that not free speech?
That's exactly what it is. And we shouldn't be worried about whether you're for or against an item. If you want to speak on something, speak on it. And it's going to be up to them. Maybe we bring it and have a healthy debate the next agenda item. And that's what the government's all about. And that's what our tax money's for, is for them to listen to everybody. And as we go even further into this next video, you can see the process, the thought process that the judge is trying to use to be against and go against this, the citizens explaining or going up and being able to talk without fear of retribution, or, thinking that the judge or the council or the judge or the commissioner's court have to say something in response.
In a trial in law or anything, you have notice requirements where both sides are given the same opportunity to present their side of the story. That's the fairness doctrine.
So he brings up the fairness doctrine in a trial, and this is far from, it's not the FCC. This is not a trial, right?
No, and again, he's stuck in that attorney mindset. He's not in the public servant mindset. And this is after 2 years behind the bench, over 2.5 years since he won his election. He's still stuck being an attorney.
His process is legalistic. It is, I want people for, I want people against. Well, you can have that on your agenda item, but this is something totally different. And he does not want this. He doesn't want somebody coming up explaining what's important to them as a citizen and not being able to rebut it or get with his staff to get the things to rebut it, because he wants to have the last word. And that's what's going on.
And that's what we've seen at every meeting. He always has to get the last word. He likes to, if someone comes up with anything that's opposed to his current position, which he almost never changes, just digs his heels in even further, he always has to talk back to him, and that's not being a public servant.
And let's listen to Victoria Calder, who is one of the people that signed up on this, and give the answer to the judge on what he really should be talking about, because he's kind of off track, and this is what she was talking about.
As I understand it, isn't a debate, and it isn't for the commissioners to discuss it all that day necessarily. It's to give voice, and anyone could do that about anything at any time, just as with city council. It doesn't mean that somebody didn't get a chance to say an opposing view, because it's just a citizen expressing their view like they might on social media.
So Ms. Calder comes up, tells the judge exactly what it is and what it's about. And you can tell by the judge's actions, look behind the scenes. And what's the first thing when she said that it's not about the agenda It's about citizens having a voice. What's the first thing that he does? He turns around and he looks at the big screen behind him to see how much time she has left. That's the perfect example of why we as citizens need this comment period.
Yeah.
And let's look at this next video. We have another citizen that came up and signed up to speak, Mr. Biggers, who's been on several of these commissioner courts, doing a great job. Let's see his take on this.
Now, in light of today's complexion in society, we need to keep in mind that there's 75 million people out there that just felt slighted on the national level, and certainly with the debacle of the last commissioner's court with the farce of this RV, there's half the county out there that wasn't represented. So these people are going to eventually come to the gates with the pitchforks and the torches if we don't start listening to them. I don't really want to think there's an arrogance here that you guys ask for people to put you in the chair and then you don't want to hear their opinions after you put you in the chair. Thanks a lot.
And, you know, plain and simple, listen to the people. Dedicate 30 minutes once a month. And, you know, these are the citizens that were sitting in court and listening to all the agenda items, listening to the commissioners and the judge sit up there and speak, and they're frustrated. They're frustrated at that court, the previous courts, and they would like to be heard.
That's it.
And another speaker was Nanette Samuelson, and let's listen to what she has to say.
The only thing, I just don't really see any downside to it because nobody's asking for a vote or a debate. It's just bringing something to your attention, and I don't really see a downside to it.
Nanette Samuelson comes up and she's like, hey, there is no downside. You know, same thing we've been talking about. You know, there is no debate. There's no discussion. Bring up your conversation or bring up what you want, your points of view, and then you say it and you walk away and you sit down.
Yeah.
And I think that is what is kind of gripping Ron and Ron right now is, oh my gosh, what are other people going to say? You know, well, folks, you know, if it's not on the agenda and they can't control it, you know, then people can say or express what they want, correct? Not just behind closed doors.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said they can't control it. That is what they fear.
Right. And so this citizen comment, I think, is more needed now than it ever has been.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully between, you know, now and the time they vote on it, you know, looks like Commissioner Andrews on the same page as Eagle and Wilson. Maybe we can get Ron and Ron on board if they just don't understand. Maybe they can watch this video and learn.
Yeah.
So in the end, what the Commissioners Court did was decided to table this motion for agenda item 5 and 6, and they're going to talk about it and maybe put it back on the agenda after a workshop, but they're going to get together and put these documents together. So please contact your Commissioners Court and tell them you would like to have the citizen comment portion once a month at least in there for a half hour. It's really needed, and I think they need to understand that you guys, the citizens, we're looking out for the citizens, that you need this to be heard on the Commissioners Court.
Yeah, so they ended up tabling it, and it looks like, based on what these guys were saying up there, it looks like this has the support of Jack, Dave, and Kevin. Not so much with the Rons. Hopefully they'll come around. Guys, thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. As always, if you have some tips, be sure to email us. You can find us on blueshark.media. And like and share on Facebook, and help the YouTube out channel there. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash that thumbs up and subscribe button. Be sure you're staying up to date with what we're putting out.
And once again, thank you, Melanie. We appreciate you being here and filling in. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Blue Shark is here for truth and transparency and looking out for you, the citizens. Shark Show out.